Victor, what is your data telling you about how commercial shippers are responding to these strikes and the rise in tensions that we've seen in the region?
Well, I would generally say, Dan, that they're very afraid. They're wary of getting into a story where that specific shipping line, that specific shipping company gets targeted and ultimately suffers because of that. There's been a subsequent development. Effectively, first were the container ships to avoid the Red Sea. Then came the LNG tankers, LNG carriers. Right now, there's not a single LNG carrier in the Red Sea at all. And I would say that the third stage really was crude oil tankers. Because right now it's only the Russians and the Saudis who use the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, still largely in an unimpeded manner. But even if those were to be targeted at some point, I mean, ultimately everyone will start to diversify their shipping routes and just divert through the Cape of Good Hope. So effectively, everyone is impacted in one way or another. And ultimately, you see a story where the Cape of Good Hope has become the largest voyage route in the Atlantic Indian Oceans, which is quite significant. We've come back to where we've been 500 years ago when there was no Suez Canal.
Indeed, and we have seen a significant drop, around 40% in fact, in the number of ships that have been traversing the Suez Canal via the Red Sea as a result of these disruptions, and at the same time a spike in costs as well. I'm curious to get a sense from you about how all of this is impacting delivery times and freight rates too. Have we seen a marked impact?
Absolutely. I mean, for delivery times, effectively any destination from the Indian Ocean into the Atlantic Basin, specifically into Europe, is a plus 10 to 15 days. So that on that you can count everything will be longer. For instance, Jamnagar to Rotterdam through Suez Canal would have been 24. Right now it's 42 days. So delivery times are longer. Effectively, you need more fuel. You need to pay the shipping companies more. So freight is even more expensive than it used to be before. Effectively, just as a rule of thumb, through the Cape of Hope, Good Hope into Europe, everything is $1 million more expensive than it was before. And that's also including the fact that, to go through the Suez Canal, you need to pay transit fees. You need to pay higher insurance. But even with the transit fees, even with higher insurance, the freight is significantly more expensive. Ultimately, the longer the story, the Red Sea disruptions goes on, the higher the inflation risk for the global economy. Because again, container ships fully impacted, LNG fully impacted, crude halfway impacted. Everything is in the red zone of potentially being targeted.
Indeed, and what we've also seen is these latest strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. It's very clear that the US, the UK and the international community are attempting to safeguard commercial shipping by conducting these strikes against what they believe are facilities used by the Houthis conducting attacks on commercial shipping. Do you think it's going to have any impact for any of these operators when it comes to restoring confidence and getting ships back through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal?
Well, regrettably, I think it's not going to have a lasting impact because you don't really need to have that many instances of the Houthis targeting tankers. You just need one instance, which is dangerous enough. Remember the naphtha cargo, which was already burning for 3 days after the Houthi drone? Well, that's the kind of a development that ultimately wakes up everyone to the risks inherent in supplying goods through the Red Sea and through the Bab el-Mandeb. And everyone will say, no, we don't need these risks. We don't need to lose cargoes just because one stray drone wasn't effectively shut down by the operation. So I would argue we need an absolute silence from the Houthis. And I'm afraid that no one can guarantee the absolute silence from the Houthis right now. The drones are just too plentiful.